apart. I just walked over from chapel at Cannon Chapel at Candler School of Theology and heard a wonderful sermon on Esther. And the preacher challenged us around privilege, responsibility, and courage. In May of this year, it was my privilege to travel with two other United Methodist bishops, Bishop Deese from North Georgia and Bishop Williamson from Louisiana, and students from our United Methodist seminaries to Palestine and to Israel, and to engage, to learn, to listen, to see. And we are so delighted today that Keely DiMartino, one of that group, is with us to share a bit about the experience and for us to then have any dialogue given the remaining time that we have. I just finished listening to a very hard yet very good and essential book by Omar El-Akkad, who is an Egyptian-Canadian journalist and novelist. And he has written a book called Someday Everyone Will Have Been Against This. Heads are nodding. Some of you have read it as well. The title sort of says it all. Someday, upon reflection, what's happened in Gaza will be accepted as a horrific thing, and the wonderment would be, why didn't someone do something to stop it? Here we are still with some signs of movement toward a resolution, with Palestinians obviously absent from every headline and every conversation. We find ourselves still in this hard moment. And I'm going to turn to Keely, who's going to do the sharing. Keely, thank you so much for your witness.
Thank you. Good afternoon. It's good to be with you all today. I'm excited to share with you because I think our trip was really special in the way that when you often go to the Holy Land and you walk in Jesus's footsteps and you see all of these iconic places, this was not quite that trip. This was some of that, but really this was engaging with the Christian Palestinians that are living there, that have been through this struggle now for years, getting to know their stories, hearing their praises as well as their laments. And so I'm excited to share with you all today because I feel like we walked where Jesus would have walked if he was here today. And so the PowerPoint I was originally going to use is locked somewhere in the cloud. And so I have an alternate PowerPoint. So I will skip through some slides because this was the presentation I gave to my church, and it was much lengthier. And I went into some of the history, the background of why we are where we are. So I'm going to skip over that part and get to like the pictures and the fun stuff. Okay, so I'm going to share. I am going to find my PowerPoint. Okay. Are we seeing it?
Yes.
Good, cool. All right, so here is our group that went on pilgrimage. Here's all the fun history stuff, just to kind of give my church an overview, because I feel like a lot of them weren't familiar with the situation there. A lot of false information has circulated around, and so kind of trying to speak truth to that. This is the view from our hotel in Bethlehem, which I thought was especially beautiful. Eating in Bethlehem, we got to walk around and do some shopping, and we noticed that many of the shops, many of the hotels were closed. There was no room at the inn because they've not been able to sustain with the economy, with the lack of tourism coming through. A lot of people have had to shut down their businesses in Bethlehem. This is the wall that separates the Palestinians in the West Bank from the rest of Israel. And then in the bottom right-hand corner is the key, also known as the Nakba, from 1948. When the Palestinians were displaced from their homes, they took their keys with them with the hopes that someday they would be able to return to those places. When they did come back, those places were already occupied. And so this giant key stands as a symbol of that ongoing lament for the Palestinians. Here's the Church of the Nativity. And it's very disheartening to, go into this church and see these beautiful places and then actually talk to the people that are really having a hard time there because of the occupation. We had the privilege of worshiping at the Evangelical Lutheran Church in Bethlehem. And these were the stained glass windows in that church. I'm a stained glass person, so I always take pictures. And they actually confirmed some students that morning, which was a great celebration, a sign of hope for the church there. But while we were there, we also met Rose Tarazzi, who was grieving because she had lost her sister not long before we had visited. And although she applied to go to see her in Gaza to be a part of the funeral, the government actually denied that request. So she was not able to go and bury her sister. Within that same church, we went from this celebration time over the confirmation to a time of sharing the current situation. And we met with Reverend Munther Isaac and Rifat Kassis. I will not read this to you. But to sum it up, they really, especially Reverend Isaac, expressed this sadness for the way that the church in America has responded to this crisis, and the way that we've also been somewhat complicit by support of our government in what's happening there. All right, here's some more beautiful churches. The Church of the Nativity. That's me sitting where Mary gave birth. As a mom, that feels poetic to me. And restaurant. Okay, here, this is Alice Casilla. This was someone that we got to meet who is actively advocating for both her family's land, which has been taken by settlers, as well as others whose land has been taken from them. She had held an event prior to us coming there where she brought together people from all denominations to kind of raise up prayer for that area. They had built this beautiful little mini church and held a worship service there. The next day it was destroyed by the government. Anytime this unity starts to gain traction, it's seen as something dangerous. So that was our group meeting with her there. We went to the Hope Secondary School in Beit Jala and got to meet Principal Kader Saba. He talked with us about what it was like to be there when those initial missiles struck and how they had to shut down the school for a time, and how difficult that was. But he told this story about how even though the school was shut down, they ended up using the parking lot as a source of income for the school by charging for people to park there. And so just to see the resilience, they are now serving 350 students, so it has grown tremendously. But this is one of our UMC Global Ministry Advanced projects. And so it was neat to see these multiple sites that the UMC is supporting and to see it really thriving amidst a terrible situation. Now I sat still for too long, my light turned off. Okay. All right, so part of our trip was going to Hebron, and we had a lot of fun trying to get there because the gate we were supposed to use was shut down. We had to drive 2 hours out of the way to get into the city, which really was a taste of what some of these Palestinians struggle with every day. Trying to get to work, trying to get to school, trying to go see family, get to hospitals, and just these checkpoints and gates that can be shut at any time for no reason, and really just the struggle of that's part of their daily life, of this restricted travel from place to place. Within Hebron, we got to see where the market used to be, where lots of Palestinian shops had thrived there at one time or another. Now you see barbed wire, you see trash, you see many closed shops. The bottom left-hand corner shows you that above their heads, they had this metal grate that would keep items from being thrown down on top of the Palestinians by the Israelis that were occupying the buildings above them. And so that's the kind of situation that they're living in. Okay, so we were trying to go to lunch and we weren't able to pass through the gate there because we had some Palestinians with us in the van. And so we ended up walking through a graveyard and up a very steep hill to get to lunch. And then when we finally did arrive, as we were waiting for lunch to be finished, we noticed that there were 2 armed guards circling around the house where we were planning to eat, because someone was there from the organization of former Israeli military that have now come to see how wrong the situation is and are now advocating for the Palestinians. A few of the representatives were also in that location, and so they had been followed by some Israeli armed guards. And so that was extremely scary, sitting in that restaurant and again, just to feel what they feel on a daily basis of this constant military presence with large weapons and just extremely unsettling. All right, we met Atam Nazra in Wadi Fukin, which is a farming village that's down in the valley. And you'll see the picture on the bottom is the valley and his farm. The picture on the top is the Israeli settlement that built right up the hill. Their pollution comes down the hill into this farming valley and really hurts their agriculture. The Israelis sometimes restrict their water usage, so they're not able to water their plants. And so this is another community that we support through the UMC. But just an awful situation for these people living there, that this is their livelihood, these farms, and to see these Israeli settlements come in and really just no care for the Palestinian people. All right, then we went to the Garden of Gethsemane. Beautiful churches. The Mount of Olives. We visited the Jerusalem Princess Basma Center, which is another one of the organizations we support through the Advanced Project. They are in Jerusalem and they help families with special needs, kids that need extra therapies, that need a special learning environment. They support moms. They have like an actual live-in program for moms and their children. And so we got to see this place that really is thriving, even in the midst of what's happening there. But they had connections because they had a branch also in Gaza. And so that struggle of trying to get support to Gaza, when really everything had been shut down, right? They couldn't get food in, they couldn't get medical assistance in, and they had a team there of only a couple people. But that was neat to see these kids thriving and a school that really looks similar to the schools that we have here and the like sensory rooms and things like that. Went to the Pool of Bethsaida. And then we did the Via Dolorosa walk. Again, I'm skipping through this. This is just your typical touristy stuff. St. George's Cathedral. This is where we got to meet with some of the local church leaders. Again, talked about how difficult it is for Christian Palestinians that are living there. Many of them have left. The ones that are stayed are having trouble making ends meet. Dean Richard said something that I thought was really powerful. He said, Christians in Palestine have no obligation at all to be optimistic, but hope is something different. And I think that's what we saw from many of the people that we interact with, that they had kind of lost that sense of optimism, right? It looked like there was no end in sight, but they still had hope, right? They still knew God was with them, that God was going to take care of them. So I thought that was really a beautiful perspective to have for such a difficult situation. All right. We met with Wadi Abu Nassar, who coordinates the Holy Land Christian Forum. And he talked about the war and the number of people that have left. He expressed this concern that you have so many different church denominations within Israel that it's hard for them to all get on the same page. And I think that's what's beautiful about, the ecumenical connections that we have, that there is strength in being able to come together to fight injustice, to really be united in our plan. And so that was something that he saw lacking in Israel. The Sea of Galilee, St. Peter's Church, Garden of the Beatitudes, a camel, the Wailing Wall, all right, so we met with the rabbis for human rights. And this was, I believe, the only non-Christian group that we met with while we were there. Mostly we were with Palestinian Christians, but we met with this rabbis organization. And, they have come together, 170 rabbis from different denominations that are really dedicated to fighting against the way that their religion has been used as a weapon in Israel. They actually try to meet with these young Israeli soldiers to tell them that they have options. They don't have to be so cruel to the Palestinian people. They partner with other organizations to fight for injustice. They organize an annual march each year. So really cool. And they said, one of them said something that really stuck with me. She said, if your religion means hurting someone, you are doing it wrong. This is not Judaism. We need to call bullshit. I'm sorry I swore on the presentation. But I think that feels especially relatable to us in this environment of Christian nationalism, that sometimes Christianity is branded in a way that means using our scripture to cause harm to other people. And I would argue that that's not Christianity. And so I think there's some parallels with that. All right, finally, we met with Omar Harami, who's the director of Sabeel Ecumenical Liberation Theology Center in Jerusalem. Again, he talked about the way that the church has kind of let down the people of Israel, that we really need to be fighting for something to happen over there. He talked about how inclusivity is important, prophetic justice, and resisting evil in all forms. He said something really profound. He said, you don't need a seminary degree to teach your kids how to share a meal with the homeless, but you need theology to teach genocide. And I think that's, what we've unfortunately seen in Israel is this using theology as a weapon to justify this oppression, this genocide. The church needs to do something. Omar took us through the old city. We got to see the Armenian corridor, how they have kind of stood their ground, even though Israel has kept trying to take these parts of the holy city, but the Armenians have stood their ground and stayed there. And then this is us being goofy, and that's me at the airport. And this is my reflection. They made it extremely difficult for us to leave Israel. A lot of bullying tactics. And I think because there's this fear that if Americans see what is actually happening in Israel, what is actually happening with these Palestinians, that we would not be able to sit by. And so I conclude with this, that stories are costly. Stories are costly. And so going to Israel and hearing these stories of all these people, from the praise to the lament, it costs them something. And so to be able to come back and to share that with you all, I think is really important. And to continue to speak truth into a situation that has been presented in a very specific way that is not exactly truthful, if that makes sense. So that was our experience, and I'm open to questions if anyone has any.
We have time for maybe one question if someone has one that they would like to ask of Keely. And then Keely, is it okay if we share your email address with the group if they would like to learn more?
Certainly.
Great, thank you. Yes, Bishop Carcano.
Thank you for sharing your story and your experience. It's thought-provoking, and grateful for your having made the trip. The question is, what did you and others come back thinking we should be doing as United Methodist in response? A lot has happened since May, and so there may be other thoughts, but that's what I'm asking myself. What should we be doing?
Yeah, so what I did I presented this to my congregation, but I also incorporated it into a sermon to reach a larger audience. And I presented them with the material that the UMC has been putting out, because there is material. The bishops have said, you know, this is what we stand by. There are recommendations for what you can do to kind of try to fight against this. But unfortunately, my church had not heard any of that before. And so when I presented it and you know, really said, unfortunately, we are supporting this, you know, by our country helping to supply Israel with weapons for this war, we are supporting it. And so for them, they just didn't know. They didn't know that the UMC had a stance on this because it hadn't been communicated to them. So the information is out there, but we got to get it to the people.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you. And thank you so much, Keely, for your presentation. I'm wondering if you might also be willing to share with us what you shared with your church, so that we have additional resources as well as we continue this education. Yeah, thank you. I appreciate all of you being with us this week, this month. I know that there is so much more that we could talk about, and I suspect that we will come back to this conversation again in future months as this continues to unfold and we continue to seek justice and mercy for our brothers and sisters and siblings. I'm going to invite us to be in a time of prayer. Holy and gracious God, we give you thanks for this time together, for the voices that have spoken wisdom, for the costly stories that call us to more, for the faith that binds us across this whole globe. We thank you for all who live as faithful witnesses in a world where unity is considered dangerous. And we give you thanks for the courage, the honesty, the hope that continues to live on. Thank you for all who labor quietly and faithfully in congregations and communities and corners of the world where the work of love is hard and the results often seem small and unseen. Renew us, O God, for the journey ahead. Give us hearts that stay tender, spirits that stay strong, and eyes to see your presence in all the people of the world. Remind us continually that our privilege holds responsibility. And then, O God, give us the courage we need to live accordingly. May the unity that we find in you continue to grow through our words, our ministries, our lives, until it stands in opposition to all of the hatred and harm being done. We pray this in the name of Christ, the one who sends us out to serve and to love. Amen. Thank you all for being with us. Thank you, Bishop Ward, for your reminder to us that we are continually asked to be pressing our government for change in policy. And then thank you, Keely, for sharing stories that are indeed costly. We will share with all of you her information as well as the presentation that she's offered us today. Thank you.
Thank you all. See you next month.